So if you had a kopi this morning, chances are that your coffee beans came from Vietnam. Coffee and development are closely linked in Vietnam. It's the world's largest exporter of cheap coffee beans, with coffee exports contributing USD 3 billion to its economy. And most of these coffee beans come from a very special location. Dak Lak, the land of coffee. This tiny province is home to hundreds of smallholder coffee plantations which produce over 55% of Vietnam's coffee exports. However, while Dak Lak is an indisputable part of Vietnam's economic success, it's also a site of contestation and conflicts over who can and cannot produce. In Dak Lak, coffee is grown by two groups of people. First, there's the Eid people. These people are the indigenous highlanders of Dak Lak. Even before the arrival of the French, the Eid people have been living in Dak Lak for hundreds of years. And then there's the Kin, the largest ethnic group in Vietnam, who live in the lowlands and have secured majority of the land and the rights to grow coffee. In recent years, the Eid people have been increasingly marginalized in Dak Lak, despite their native origins. Their numbers are dwindling. They own less land for coffee farming, and they account for the majority of poor households in Dak Lak. Now, if we simply stop the story here, it's easy to understand the conflict in Dak Lak as simply a matter of winners, the Kin, versus losers, the Id. But in reality, this is far more complicated than a local game with these two players. To understand this, we need to examine two processes: dispossession and accumulation. So what is dispossession? Dispossession refers to how people are separated from their property, while accumulation refers to the process of how capital is amassed in the hands of a select few. These two processes were first linked by Marx through the notion of primitive accumulation, where a capitalist class expropriates land and labor for capital accumulation. This provides the preconditions for society's transition to capitalism. Harvey builds on this to show how the same processes, including land grabbing, privatization, and commodification of labor, continue to underpin expropriations under advanced capitalism. Particularly, Harvey explores how this process is not just limited to the local scale, but expands to encompass global local interactions. To understand dispossession in Dak Lak, let's turn back the clocks to more than 100 years ago, when coffee was first introduced to Vietnam by French colonizers. The French engaged Vietnamese workers to produce cash crops like coffee for exports. The introduction of coffee also promoted the plantation system in Vietnam. However, the Eid were regarded by the French as land wasteful, lazy, and unsuitable for plantation labor. Instead, they preferred the Kin, who were seen as loyal and diligent paddy cultivators. To encourage the Kin to move into Dak Lak, the French started the process of dispossession. Land in Dak Lak, once a public resource for Sweden agriculture for the Eid, could no longer be freely used. The land was now under the control of colonial administration, who gave the Kin legal privileges to land. But colonial-era developments were not solely to blame for the dispossession of the Eid. In the 1980s, the Vietnamese government adopted an economic liberalization policy called the Doi Mai, which gave an additional push to dispossession. A land law was introduced, and the Eid people faced an even greater shortage of land as land allotment became unequal among households. Such dispossession processes were devastating for the Eid people. Crucially, dispossession resulted in inequalities in capital accumulation. According to a study conducted in 2008 by the Journal of Rural Sociology, only 46% of Eid households held land use certificates as compared to 83% of Kin households. But an even greater problem was the widespread introduction of the monoculture plantation to Dak Lak, creating an over-reliance on coffee for economic growth. And when the global coffee bubble collapsed in 2001, coffee farmers, both Eid and Kin alike, were plunged into poverty as coffee beans lost value as an asset. The truth is that Dak Lak's exceptional growth from coffee is an unstable recipe created by global agents for their own capital accumulation motives. This was never simply a story of one local group dispossessing another. Rather, it's a story of how global capitalists have forced the Eid and Kin into the cruel game of dispossession in local arenas like the Dak Lak province, creating preconditions for accumulation while they themselves sit back to reap the benefits. So this cup of coffee you see right here, it's not as innocent as it seems.